everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in the greater Greenville area of South Carolina. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. Just a reminder, as always, please like, rate, review, subscribe, any of those good things you can do to support this show. All I ask of you guys to support the show is if you like it, subscribe, like whatever your podcast app or whatever it is that you're watching this on allows you to do, please do that. And just use me as your realtor. That's all I ask. I'm not doing advertisements on the show. I'm not doing anything like that. Those are the only things I'm asking of you guys. And I appreciate all of my listeners. So thank you guys for tuning in. Today we have a special guest on the show, Andrew Dixon, the owner of Dixon Pest. He's recording this from inside of his car. He's sick, so he's being a trooper for me here, doing this recording, and so I really appreciate it. I've known Andrew for a long time. I've used him for pest control pretty much since he started his business, as far as I can remember. And he's been a great friend and a great person to work with over the years. So, Andrew, thank you for coming on the show. Welcome to the show. Thanks,
man. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah, that's right. Andrew texts me very frequently about the show. So I always like when I'm able to have people on the show that are actual listeners that
sometimes I delete those texts too before I send them.
Oh boy,
I try not to be too controversial.
Andrew says he tries not to get too controversial, but I beg to differ on that point. Well, Andrew, again, thank you for coming on. For those of you that are listening or watching, I will let you know that we started the show and then Andrew's phone overheated, and so thankfully we didn't get too far in. We're having a redo here.
This
is what happens when you try to do Zoom from inside of a hot vehicle.
That's right.
But we're just gonna go right back to what we had started before, and I thought it was a very interesting story. I had asked Andrew, and I'm gonna ask you again. What's the story behind you getting into pest control? Why did you decide to do that? How did you end up in pest control?
Well, it goes back to 08 to 10. We had a recession, which you know, and I got let go from my position as a manager at a hardware store. And the gentleman that I worked for, he was kind of an entrepreneur. He had bought and sold a couple businesses, and he let me borrow his pressure washer, and I did a couple side hustles where I go pressure wash people's houses while working for him full time. And as the recession built up, another friend of mine who's a vet, he had opportunity to service what they call the inventory, all the houses that were foreclosed that couldn't get released into the market. There were tons. I mean, I'm sure nationwide it was probably more than I even realized. But in the upstate, they had us hustling to clean them up, to make them safe. And then we had to maintain them as they released them into the market. So they wouldn't, I guess, flood the market with too many homes. So during that time, it was gangbusters, man. I would leave the house in first thing in the morning while it was dark, and I'd get home when it was dark. We had just tons of work. They had tight time frames. You had to have so much work done in a certain amount of time. It was kind of my first introduction into being an entrepreneur, if you will, or working for myself, quote unquote. There was a lot of lawn care involved in that type of work. So that was kind of my first take on that. But as I was getting into that, I worked pest control for another company for about a year, for a friend of a friend who really was just another great boss, just another good man, Christian man who cared and showed me that a boss man can be caring. So we parted ways for one reason or another. That was my first taste of pest control. Kind of put that on the back burner, right? So as the inventory started whittling down, HUD basically started making their restraints higher and higher and higher to the point where it was just stressing me and my family out. And based on my wife's counsel, we just let it go completely. It wasn't really a contract, so to speak, but it was one of those situations where it's like, okay, I'm not going to drive from Gray Court to Pelzer, all the way up to Pickens, for $20 or whatever. So as that fit, yeah, oh dude, it was crazy. Some of their restraints that weren't there at the beginning, you had like a 3 or 4 day window. So you would go to one neighborhood and there'd be 3 foreclosures in one neighborhood. You could cut all the yards at the same time. But as the inventory started dropping, I think they were intentionally trying to whittle people out. They would make you cut 1 yard in that neighborhood one day, and then you had to go back 2 days later to cut a house down the road, their yard. Instead of cutting it the same day, you had to come back 3 days later to cut it. And we're talking $40 a service. I mean, you're working on volume. You're not working on price per yard per se. But with that, kind of got me into lawn care, and I went full-time lawn care after that, probably for about 7 to 8 years. And during that time, I had some customers ask me, "Hey, do you spray for bugs? Can you spray around the house while you're cutting grass?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I worked lawn care, or I did pest control for a year. I could do that." And then next thing you know, the customers started building up, and we started building some pest control business. And at that point, because of my hatred towards machinery in general, especially lawnmowers, I called it quits. Had a guy come down from Ohio looking to start a lawn care company, and he basically bought that side of the business. And that was like probably 2014, I'd imagine, 2013, when I did a full cut, when I got rid of lawn care completely and went full-time pest control.
So as far as that's a great story, by the way. Obviously, it's crazy the different paths we all have to take to end up where we are. So as far as the job goes, I don't feel like a lot of people like really know what is involved with pest control. It's like it means something different to different people, right? For some people, they probably picture termites. For some people, they probably picture roaches. Other people might picture animals.
That's right.
What is it that you would say is is something that the average person wouldn't know that is a part of your job? Or what's something about your job that you feel like is just a misconception in general?
That's a good question, Stan. There's probably a couple different things that I can think of. Probably one of the most prominent things is staying on schedule and working with people. People are our primary. It's really the primary target when it comes to pest control. DIY is a real factor in today's world. You've got YouTube videos. You can buy products online. There's a lot of different ways people can do things for themselves that they maybe wouldn't have been able to do back in the day. So when it comes to that, it's really just the service side. Does someone want to keep up with their pest control regimen, right? Does somebody want to crawl under their house? Does somebody, want to confront a squirrel in the attic, or, catch a skunk, and so I think when they think about pest control, they don't think about those aspects. How do you serve the person as opposing just to treat for the pests, quote unquote? Because, there's a lot of, and again, I tell this to all of our customers, it's really in the routine that you find the best practice for pest control. Yeah, you can get one treatment a year, but nature does not stop. Those palmetto bugs, man, they're moving. They're called American cockroaches, technically, but they're
called? Andrew's talking about the massive cockroaches that we have down here in South Carolina that terrifies everyone that moves here from out of state.
That's right. They're like an alien to someone from Manhattan. They're like, what is this thing?
Are they just in South Carolina? Or are they in like Georgia, North Carolina?
Oh yeah, they're nationwide. There is a form of American. Yeah, there is a form of American cockroach throughout the whole, at least the continental America, United States, but they're not as prevalent. So we call that pest pressure, right? So there's different temperate zones, and really as you move down, especially from the Appalachian area, like the upstate South Carolina, the pest pressure actually increases. You got more humidity. It stays warmer longer. you're going to see a lot more of those American cockroaches. They're going to be a lot more active. They're still even further north, but because of the temperate zone and the change in the weather, like when you go up north and it gets cold, it stays cold, right?
Mhm.
The frost level in Idaho is like, 16 feet or something crazy, where in South Carolina, it's like 6 inches. And so the activity is a lot higher. They're still there, but they're not as active.
Yeah, and that's one of the tricky things is knowing when they're going to all of a sudden start appearing. Like I've run into that with some of my rentals where it's like all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they're just appearing out of nowhere. Sometimes
Yeah.
my clients that move here from out of state too, it's just kind of confusing. Like, what do we do about these stupid bugs?
Yep.
And thankfully, people like yourself are able to address them, and you've been great about if a service doesn't quite eliminate the pest, come back out. You've always been great about that.
That's good.
Do we need to be afraid that any of these cockroaches or anything are starting to become resistant to some of the chemicals that we're using
The
against them?
products, yeah, there is a generational resistance that can build up. Um, it kind of depends on the population. It kind of depends on there's a lot of different factors. At Dixon Pest, we use what we call our triple barrier system, which uses three different products in rotation. And so when you're changing up the products, you're creating gaps, right, to where they're not being exposed to the same product over and over and over again. And again, another philosophy at Dixon Pest, which I would say the industry as a whole is trying to go this direction, is that we're focusing more on what they call the mechanical aspect of pest control, or eliminating the physical aspects, which could be, foliage control, moisture control. You could, be sealing gaps and things of that nature. With some of the newer technology in building construction, you're finding there's a lot less ways for these pests to get in. Now, the caveat is there is a section or a group of pests that come in on people or animals. Those are what we call like carrier pests or urban pests. Those are the German cockroaches, which are way different than American cockroaches. And a lot
The
of people are
the
like,
the,
oh,
the German ones are the tiny ones, right?
yeah, and they live in people's kitchens and inside people's homes. Now they're not just coming in from the outside, right? So the American cockroach, they're in the leaves and the stumps. They like to, build up in your gutters, things like that. But those German cockroaches, they're coming in a box, or they're coming in, literally anywhere. I hate, you don't want to throw any certain company or any certain, organization under the bus, but you can't run and hide from these bugs. You have to be ready for them. So the quicker that you see one is the better. You
How
don't
quickly do they
don't have
reproduce? Are they pretty
30
fast?
days. Oh yeah, especially Germans, man. Their gestation period is super fast. You are going to have a mess on your hands within 3 months. So if you ever think, oh, they'll just go away, or I'll just do this and they'll be fine, I would be careful, because German cockroaches are they're elusive. They can hide in places that you wouldn't think they'd hide.
Behind the refrigerator.
Oh, easy. Well, there's a condensate. There's a
That's where I always
condensate
see
tray.
them.
Yeah. Well, there's a condensate tray under the fridge that collects the water from the motor, and the motor puts off a little bit of heat, right? So guess what? You got two of the biggest things that bugs love: heat and water. And so that's going to be a prime spot for them to hang out. It's kind of hard to eliminate the fridge, right? Talking about the mechanical things that you can change with pest control. So that's one area you can't really control.
Yep.
But if you're being aware, that's going to be your biggest thing, is just being aware. Same thing with bed bugs. Same thing with fleas. Those are the three biggest carrier bugs that we deal with. And I tell people, the quicker you catch them, the quicker they're gone. If you think they're going to go away, you're going to have a big problem on your hand long term.
So what would you say are some preventative steps that people should take from a bug standpoint? What's something that you would recommend, everyone do besides call
Okay.
you?
Yeah, right. Well, again, some of these might seem aggressive or extreme, but when you've had bed bugs, yeah, they don't seem as extreme, right? So an easy one right off the bat is when you're traveling. Yeah, I don't care if you're staying at a 5-star resort or if you're staying at a low end motel. You always want to check under your mattress. Do a quick check. You know, the fecal matter or the blood stains that a bed bug puts off, they're noticeable. You know, maybe use your flashlight on your phone. I would say a 2-minute inspection around some areas like that can save you big time from bringing bed bugs home.
Do you
I
have to do
also
you tear the bed apart, or is
uh, you can again. I always tell people the more you're concerned about it mentally, the more you want to do your inspection. Um, I definitely would peel away any sort of mattress cover, and I would also look at the box spring if there's one under the mattress. Don't put your not your furniture. Don't put your baggage or your luggage on the bed right away. Don't put them up against the bed. Maybe put them in the bathtub or set them on a table. Like you want to keep it away from the bed until you at least get a good inspection, right? Um, Another big one is when you're getting stuff from Amazon or shipping, maybe open your box on the front porch, right? Do a quick inspection there. Don't necessarily bring it into your home and just open it up carte blanche like nothing's going to happen. Some people might think that's extreme, but again, until you've had German cockroaches crawl out of a box, you know, you might think twice.
my mom had them, and this is disgusting. She had them come out of produce that she got from a grocery store recently. Not
Yep.
locally. She's not local, but that kind of blew my mind.
Oh yeah. And again, I mean, when grocery store when they're getting food from potentially across the world, right? Mexico's a big producer and a lot of our favorites, right? Or Costa Rica and all that stuff. Like you would be surprised, like the bananas, avocados, you know, you might find some bugs. And again, a lot of these big companies and big grocery stores, they've got pest control in place, they've got their protocols in place, but you just never want to just assume that everything's going to be gold.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a story. What's a crazy pest control story that you have? Well,
Uh,
just one that comes to mind.
well, I don't want to, we don't want to give any names or
No,
places.
no names.
No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. Uh, this is all fictitious, right? Well, as as you know, as a pest control provider, we are at many times a liaison, right? People are sensitive. You might have a homeowner and a tenant, right? You might have a homeowner, a manager, and a tenant. You have 3 different parties going on at one time, and everybody is looking out for themselves in most of the situations. So as a pest control provider, we're looking for the win-win-win. We want the homeowner to win, we want the tenant to win, and we want the manager to win. But there are some situations where not everyone can win. Probably one of the most bizarre situations that I've been in was a tenant situation where there was a bed bug situation, and most leases, I don't know if you've got these in your leases, but if you bring the bed bugs in, the homeowner's not going to pay to get rid of them, right? It's kind of on the tenant. Well, a tenant had claimed that there were bat bugs in the house, right? And so a bat bug in a
yeah,
bed.
what are bat bugs?
So actually, again, there are some theories that bed bugs actually came from the bat bug. So
Okay.
bed bugs have been around for centuries. There are recordings of bed bugs in the Roman Empire. The reason bed bugs have kind of resurfaced in America in the last 20 or 30 years is mainly due to international travel. But if you go back to the 40s and 50s, America basically eliminated bed bugs. So like people like us, 80s, 90s, bed bugs were not even a thing. We almost completely eradicated bed bugs in America, primarily due to the products that was used after World War II. These products would kill birds out of the sky. I mean, dude, it just literally. And I know this sounds crazy, but the way furniture has evolved has actually changed some of that. We have a lot more stick type furniture as opposed to that old traditional, heavy sofas and stuff like that. The invention of the vacuum cleaner has actually made a big impact on eradicating bed bugs, but that was mainly in the States. where bed bugs are super prevalent in other countries around the world. So basically, as the FDA and the EPA and all that, as they have basically eliminated some of those really strong chemicals, and international travel have kind of crossed over, you're now seeing bed bugs come back. And they're not, I'll be honest, it's going to be hard to say if they'll ever leave. And again, this is going to sound crazy, but the Greenville, Columbia corridor in South Carolina is actually top 10 bed bug areas in the country. So we see a lot. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but there's a lot, there's a lot of international business coming our way and stuff like that. I'm kind of segueing a little bit, but going back to the original story. So if it's a bat bug, it doesn't fall under the lease, and the tenant knows it. And so we go out there, and I'm thinking, how do I take care of this? Management's like, hey, man, we just need to take care of this customer. So I'm quote unquote playing along with the scenario. And man, they've got me up in this attic just hunting down bat bugs, hunting down bats. And it's getting to the point where I'm like,
so what are bat bugs? Can you explain that? Because I actually don't even know what they are.
Okay, so I didn't finish that. So they look just like bed bugs.
Okay.
Except there's a couple minor biological differences. Like if basically you have to look under a microscope. One of them is the hairs. They have little microscopic hairs that come off their bodies, where a traditional bed bug doesn't have the same type of hairs that a bat bug does. But by the naked eye, they can look almost exactly right.
You mentioned going into an attic. Do they live in attics? Do they live in beds like bed bugs do? What?
Okay, that's a good question. So the reason I'm in the attic is because bats can potentially be in the attic space. Typically, when you find a bat bug infestation, it's because you have a massive bat roost, and the bat bugs, their population is getting so large that the bugs are actually starting to spread through the attic space or through the ceiling. And so what the tenant was claiming is that the bat bugs were starting to infest her bedroom. And again, it's bizarre because I could have just dropped the hammer and said, these are not bed bugs, right? These are bed bugs, and that's just where we need to stand. But in an attempt to take care of the management and the homeowner and still give the tenant the benefit of the doubt, dude, I'm digging through insulation. I've been out there 3 or 4 times trying to treat for bat bugs, and I can't find bat bugs. And it comes to a point where I can't actually get out. I can't go into the tenant is so concerned about their deposit, they're refusing basically any sort of information that I'm giving them, right? They brought in a third party. They said that it was a bat bug. I know it's not a bat bug. So again, this is not as pest control related. We've got to go to Clemson. So we're getting to the point where no one's satisfied, and we've got to bring in the DPR, Department of Pest Regulation, which is Clemson University. And at the end of the it turned from a what I would consider a very turnkey normal service call to you can't even go to the property without someone else being there. You're right. Well, thankfully the Clemson, they do an excellent job. They're entomologists, and that department, man, they are excellent at what they do. So they got the bed bug, they went under the microscope, and they confirmed it was a bed bug. And so, long story short,
wow,
the tenant had to lose their deposit. Again, it's kind of bizarre because we're talking this situation probably went on for 2 months. We probably had to go out there 6-7 times.
So do they have to get rid of a bunch of furniture then?
Well, basically, yeah. Well, the tenant, I think they actually got kicked out, to be honest with you. They brought it in on all their furniture,
right?
Because I saw it on their furniture, and I'm sitting here thinking, if there were bat bugs, you would see them migrating, if you will, from the roost of the bats. Because there's also bird mites, and again, bird mites, they kind of and bed bugs, they kind of can look similar,
mm-hmm.
but again, Never say never in pest control, man. Never say always. So you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but there comes a point in time where it just got so crazy. We basically had to call in the big guns,
That's wild.
and thankfully Clemson got that under control.
So let's transition for a second here to termites. So I think most people know that termites eat wood and are and are obviously bad for homes, right? But beyond that, I don't feel like people necessarily know a whole lot about termites, where they come from, what they're trying to do. So how do termites end up in homes, and at what point are they actually a major problem?
Okay, that's a good question, man. So termites, they're the only organism in the world that eats wood, by the way. So if anyone ever thinks that another insect or something else is eating the wood, they're mistaken.
The
There
other
are
ones are like what? They're burrowing in the wood,
correct.
or laying eggs in the wood or something like that.
That's correct. So powder post beetles, old house borers, carpenter ants, things of that nature. They're still using the wood. Even carpenter bees. They are burrowing into the wood, but they're not actually consuming the wood for food. And the only reason termites can do that is because they have little organisms in their gut, right? So it's weird because the termites aren't the ones actually digesting the wood. There's actually another little organism inside their body that's digesting the wood for them.
Oh,
So
it's kind of
cool.
Parasite kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's something in their gut. And again, not to bash the termites, they're very important to our ecosystem. In fact, in South Carolina, some studies have shown that there are 1 to 3 colonies per square acre. So I tell people, it's not if, it's when. They're literally everywhere. You just can't get away from termites in South Carolina. Now, there are 2 different types of termites right now. There's really 3, but 2 main ones in South Carolina. One is the native subterranean termite. The other one is what they call the Formosan termite. Now, the Formosan termite came over during World War II. Formosa, I think, is like an island by the Philippines, maybe. And so it's a very subtropical, aggressive termite. It eats wood like 10 times faster than a native subterranean termite.
Wow.
The good news is based on Clemson and their studies, these termites haven't made it past Columbia yet. So there's a big temperate zone change in Columbia as you come up to the upstate. So they cannot survive in our temperate zone, which is great, right? Because they eat wood 10 times faster. But if you go down to Louisiana, you go down to Florida, man, they are taking over. It's a much more aggressive termite. Some of the treatments are going to be a lot more aggressive. From a business standpoint, the contracts will vary because of the ferocity of the termite. But right now, we're still, I think they've had 2 sightings right south of Columbia. So that's good news. The native termites, they still eat wood, man. They still destroy wood.
How do they end up in someone's home?
A lot of times it's not necessarily dilapidation of a structure. I would say it's the lack of maintenance, maybe. There's no house that's going to be, never exposed, right? Like I said before, you never say never, you never say always. But there are definitely factors that contribute to a higher level of termite exposure. A lot of it's going to be moisture. That's why when you do a CL100, you're tracking the moisture, right? Because as the wood is more moist, it's going to be a lot more available for the termites as they eat it. It's going to be a little bit easier for them to go to. They also like softer wood. I did an inspection one time on the Hammett house, and I don't know if you're familiar with Greer, but there's a lot of Hammett roads, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's right. That cabin was built in the 1700s. The original Hammett family. And it's built from the like heart pine, super hard wood, right? And not only was it hard wood back in the day, but over the centuries, it's dried out even more, right? And it's been added on to 3 times. So it was actually kind of a privilege, to be honest with you, to do a termite inspection, because as I'm under the house, I can literally see the different build outs, right? Because there was the original cabin, which is super tiny. all the lumber was axed. There was no saws. It was all
That's
axed,
crazy.
right? And dude, I'm telling you, that wood is so hard, no bug could penetrate it. But as you start moving out around the renovations, you start seeing the one that happened in the 50s. I think there was one in the 80s, and then there was a newer one. And it's bizarre, man, because the one that was done in the 80s, that was when they started introducing some of the soft pine. Dude, it was just annihilated with termite. It was,
Wow.
and the crazy thing is you could literally see the termite damage around the original cabin.
That's
So
crazy.
it was crazy, man. But it just shows you that there are ways to prevent termites. But with today's pace and the way houses are built, I don't know if you're going to have access to that kind of hardwood without paying a premium price. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
So how would they find a house like that? Oh, lost Andrew for a second here. We've had a few tech problems along the way here. Let me see if I can get Andrew back up. While I'm doing that, I just want to mention Andrew referenced doing a CL100, which will probably come up more than one time in this conversation. That is the wood infestation report. It's the standard inspection that covers basically looking for termites, looking for powder post beetles, looking for moisture issues, mold, mildew, things like that in the crawl space. Andrew, I was just explaining while you were getting back on what a CL100 was, since you referenced that earlier. But you can jump right back into what you were saying. How they find the home?
Yeah. So okay, so you're talking about the term. Okay, so as people build houses, right? A lot of builders, there's codes that are involved, and people foresee termite issues, and there's been a lot of different ways people have tried to avoid termites over the years. In fact, one of the state codes is you have to have a pre-construction termite service, and by law, it's good for a year. So for those who are buying new homes, you should have a termite prevention plan already wrapped into the purchase of your home. And that's basically doing a broadcast treatment for a slab, or maybe doing, your standard pier treatment under a crawl space. But know that there's going to be some type of treatment in a new house, new construction. But again, what type of termite products are people using? Some of these companies, that label is a very broad spectrum. You're going to find some products that are good for a year. You're going to find some products that are good for 10 years. Referencing some of those products from back in the 40s, they had a 50-year lifespan. I mean, it's bizarre. We're pretty much outside.
Why
of
did they
those
stop
products.
using?
When I
Were
first
they
started,
like causing cancer or something like that?
it was actually birds. It was mainly. So this is really bizarre, but it wasn't direct contact that was killing the birds. It was what they call indirect contact. So as the products were affecting the insects and other non-target creatures, it would find itself in fish, because the product just doesn't break down. Like it's like lasts forever. So the product is at a certain level of half-life. By the time it gets to the fish, the bird scoops up and eats the fish. That bird is actually ingesting a very strong product. And the next thing you know, there's dead fish and prey birds dead everywhere. That was the main culprit to some of those products. In fact, as a pest control provider, if I was to use one of those products, they would take my license away. I've had people call me out of the blue, some old timers. I've got this product I've been saving since the 50s. Will you come and treat for me? I'm like, no, sir, ain't gonna happen.
That's like when people ask me to commit a fair housing violation. I'm like, nope, not taking the bait on that. Yeah. And that happens more often than you think. People selling a home, they want to know about.
Yep.
They get an offer from someone. They want to know, are these people religious? Do they have a family? And I'm like, man, I can't talk about that. Do your own research. Look them up.
That's right.
But that's not my job.
Well, and again, no offense to the old timer, he's got a mindset where he wants something that's bulletproof, right? He wants birds falling from the sky, but the good news is though the liquid products have a lower lifespan, so to speak, they are more environmentally friendly because the chemical designs are becoming so much more targeted towards the particular insects, right? And in fact, some products on the market, they're made in such a way where they're not leaching out of the soil and affecting other areas. And I'm all about the environment, man, because I'm like, yeah, we
Yep.
want to protect the house, but at what
Yep.
cost, you know? And then you've also got the bait station, the termite bait station technology that's been around since the 80s. It's gaining more and more traction because you're not dumping all the liquid into the soil. Um, but really going back to the original question, to avoid termite infestation, you know, first and foremost, going back to the original foundation is awareness. If you're not going to be inspecting your house like a termite inspector, you might as well chalk it up, because if they get in without you seeing it, they're going to do so much more damage than you could imagine. Because we both know it, man. How often do you even think about your crawl space?
I try.
Right?
I try
5
not to
years could
think
go
about
by.
those types of things very often.
Yeah. Well, 5 years go by. You have your house. The house that I could think of in Taylor's, I think it was built probably in the 70s, ranch style model. There was a sweet old widow lady, and she got so elderly, she basically never left her room, right? Well, that whole time, the last 15, 20 years of her life, termites had they had eradicated over 50% of her crawl space. I mean, you could almost fall through the floor.
I've
It was so
I've been in a
eradicated.
house that
And
that the floor collapsed due to termite damage. That was insane.
yeah, and again, does it happen overnight? No, it happens over time. So awareness is the number one thing. Being aware. Second thing, and today I'm just, I'm a little biased as a pest control provider, but having a prevention plan is just gold, man. Because not only does it give you peace of mind, but you get that inspection. You get someone walking your property, crawling your crawl space, checking your garage, and then they're also making sure that, if it's a liquid treatment or a bait station product, that everything is working the way it should, And then the final thing is, with that prevention plan, you should be getting what they call a bond, right? Kind of like an insurance policy, where if the termites do get in and do damage, you're at least you got something in your back pocket.
Basically, so that people understand, and to make sure I understand it, the bond is essentially the insurance plan from the pest control provider, that they're basically saying, if you have termite damage after we've treated it, we will pay to repair the damages. Is that accurate? Up to a certain
Correct.
amount.
That's right. That's right. And so basically, it's illegal to put a bond or insure, so to speak, a house against termites. A treatment has to go along with it, which is why it's called a bond, right? So if someone tries to quote unquote bond your house without a treatment, they're basically breaking the law.
Thankfully, I've not run into that yet.
But
I'm sure there's some out there doing that.
It's becoming more and more rare. Oh yeah. Well, the good news is the state requires a level of insurance for all pest control companies. I can't do a termite service at your house without being properly insured by the state. And so that's across the board. They require that every year. I've got to make sure that our certification and our licenses all are in line with everything that the state requires. So there is some accountability there.
Real quick, let's pivot to animals. What's like the primary animal pest that you run into down here?
Probably mice. Mice and humans have been together for eons, right? Depending on your beliefs, it's definitely thousands of years. In fact, a lot of studies will say wherever there's a human, within 10 feet, there's going to be a rodent of some sort.
That's not
we have a
really
symbiotic
about,
relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had my share of rodent problems
I've
in my homes, as you well know. Caught 2 of them in my current house myself.
I know. Well, it's crazy, man, because I never will tell someone we can create a house that a mouse can't get into.
Yeah.
It's impossible. What we can do is create an environment that is less conducive to rodent activity. And a lot of that is within your control, but some of it is not in your control, right? So, for instance, someone might have a house with a creek in the backyard, right? And that creek is it's an environment and a habitat that is super conducive to rodent activity. We have a customer that lives next to a peach orchard, right? Rodents are going to be attracted to that falling fruit. So, when it comes to those type of situations, we recommend what we would call a regiment, right? Where you're doing everything you can to keep them out, so to speak, but then you're making measures to trap them or kill them before they enter your home. The good news is they're not on the endangered species list, right? So, we at Dixon Pest, man, we do our darndest to make sure that we're not messing up any sort of creature, animal that is not within, that structural issue. Like for instance, a customer, hey, I need you to come out and I need you to kill these squirrels in our trees. Well, not only does it go against my beliefs, because I don't want to just go out and just kill animals for fun, but it's also illegal for me to do that, which is great, But if a squirrel's getting into someone's attic, yeah, we're gonna kill them, man. We're gonna take them out. We're not really called exterminators anymore because we can't exterminate the critters or the bugs. We can control them, right? Or we can create environments that are less conducive. But once a mammal, specifically a squirrel, a mouse, a raccoon, you name it, once they find their way into your home, it's over, man. Because they've got a brain pattern that once those foraging patterns lock in, they'll never not come back. And unfortunately, it's the same thing in nature. Have you ever heard of the term a fed bear is a dead bear?
No, I've not.
Okay. So say you're at a park, right? A national park. And everywhere, do not feed bears. Do not feed. Put your trash in a certain area. Is because once that bear gets a hold of that trash can or knows that they can eat at a campsite, they will never not come back. They will always come back. And unfortunately, the rangers, they have to eliminate them. They have to kill them. It's the same thing with alligators. Don't feed the gators because they will come back every time.
So this is a really random question. How effective are cats against rodents? Like, have you had?
That's a good question.
Have you ever had to eliminate a mouse or a rat from a house that had a cat? Okay.
Oh, absolutely, no doubt about it. It is a good question though, because I actually ask customers all the time this question, and I get a lot of different feedback. Right. So some folks will be like, "Hey, I need you to come take care of my mouse problem." Oh, great. And you get there and you're going through your questions. You're trying to get feedback, trying to come up with a plan of action. Man, I've got these great cats, man. They just do such a good job. And you sit there and you kind of scratch your head, like, well, why are we here? But unfortunately, mice particularly, they are opportunistic feeders. They are attracted to other animals. If they smell the oils from cats, dogs, humans, etc., that's actually drawing them in. And the reason why is because part of their nature is they know that if another mammal is thriving in that environment, that means that environment has everything they need: food, water, and shelter. So in a lot of situations, a cat or a dog will actually attract mice. Now there are cats and dogs that are good at taking out rodents. I've had some customers, they'll be like, "Oh, you just can't feed them. You got to starve them." They're going to come and that's when they get hungry.
That's an interesting strategy.
And then I've got some customers.
That doesn't sound like something that animal rights people would be happy about.
Lovers. Oh no. Well, and on the other hand, I've had some customers like, "Oh, we feed our cat really good," and they always have a dead mouse on the front porch for us.
They've got a little business relationship going on.
That's right. That's right. So I will say, there is probably a place for cats to be what they call mousers. But I would say in general, as a normal residential homeowner, I wouldn't count on it. I mean, most cats are getting, they're kind of lazy in my opinion. But they're still a great pet to have.
Not in my
So,
opinion, but
where
I know
people
there
fall
are
on that.
some people that will agree with you on that. So we'll let that one slide.
Yeah. Well, the scariest crawl space I've ever been in was a cat
Oh,
infested crawl space. Dude, I'm telling you, I've had situations where I've had snakes and all that, but when you're in a crawl space and there's
oh my
about 30
goodness.
cats under there, dude, it's like a horror movie because you hear them. They're everywhere and they make all these noises. And that was one of the only times where I actually carried a weapon with me because I was so scared. And you know what the call was? I was there to hunt down a dead cat. Like I literally was trying to find a dead animal and I could not find that cat anywhere. And those cats had completely destroyed the HVAC system. So when they feel like they can feed cats on the outside to keep other critters away, they're actually inviting. I've had a lot of like rat calls, not mice, but rat calls because people are feeding feral cats, and that food that they put out on the back porch is actually attracting rats and other animals like possums and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Let's transition here, and we only have a few more minutes left. I know I got to let you go. I appreciate your time. Let's talk about moisture.
Oh man.
Let's talk about moisture for a second, because obviously, when you're doing a CL100, you're checking moisture levels in the crawl space and all of that. One of the key ways that a house the structure can be compromised is by excessive moisture. But moisture is confusing to people. I run into this a lot, particularly people coming from out of state. So some people will come from areas that are don't have crawl spaces, basically. States like, I run into this, people, Floridians oftentimes are used to slab homes or used to really tall homes or whatever the case may be. And the concept of a crawl space is confusing because it's like, okay, there is moisture in here, but too much of it is a problem. How much of it is a problem? There's like different levels, different degrees of problems when it comes to moisture and mold and mildew and all that. What can you say to kind of clear through all of that to someone that really just has no idea about crawl space moisture levels and what's safe and what's not?
That's a good question. So there's a couple things I would start out with. One is you can't really escape the fact that moisture is in South Carolina. It's everywhere. We live again, going back to the temperate zone factor. Obviously, moisture is a lot higher as you go down to Florida, down to Georgia, stuff like that. So first of all, you can't escape moisture 100%. Second thing is you can't escape mold spores, right? Mm-hmm. Mold spores are everywhere. Where you're sitting right now, where I'm sitting right now, there are mold spores all around us. Just like the termites, they're always going to be there, right? And so starting out by that place, I think can help someone achieve a little bit more peace of mind, right? When you get down to the nitty gritty, you're like, okay, it's always going to be there. What can I do to prevent excessive moisture or excessive mold buildup or proliferation of mold or excessive termite damage, right? And so first and foremost, you're going to, those three aspects, though they all come together, they all kind of show themselves in different ways. So like a termite, I try to tell people, they might start freaking out, right? Oh, I got termites. Listen, you've already tackled the first problem. Your number one problem is that if you don't know the termites are there, that's when they cause the most damage. But once you find out that the termites are there, you're good because they're not really fast. They're not going to tear your house down in 5 days.
Those ones
so
that
you've
are in
eliminated. Yeah, that's right. The promotions are not here. Exactly. And so like, we got it. Like, this is good news. We found out that they're here. Now we can deal with it. And so that's more of a structural issue. The only reason you need to worry about termites is because of the structural damage, right? So now that we've stopped the bleeding, we can now assess this situation and make sure your structure is properly put together. Now with mold, it's more of a, what they call air quality, right? There is a wood destroying fungus, which based on the state and the findings of Clemson University, that moisture content of that lumber has to be over 28%. That is an environment in which fungus can proliferate, and it starts to eat the wood as it grows. So I tell people, once you find that water problem, whether it be moisture entering into the crawl space, it's usually going to be a water leak of some sort, right? So that's just like the termite. Once you find the water leak, man, we're good. We've stopped the bleeding. We can step back. We can get a plan together, and we're going to take care of this. As far as like more long-term moisture issues, that's going to be a little bit more difficult because a lot of that has to do with air circulation. The good news is, from an air quality standpoint, theoretically, your air conditioner is supposed to be an enclosed system. So though you might have higher moisture readings in your crawl space, if your air conditioner is running properly and sealed properly, you have a good divider between your crawl space and your living area. So that should put you in a place where if there's too many mold spores in your living area, it should be going through your filtration system and your air conditioner. So in effect, you're controlling those mold spores, right? Whenever you find a mold buildup in someone's living area, typically there's usually an issue with the air conditioner, or it's maybe a vacant house, or there's a massive water problem in someone's home. So I've been in some houses where they're running window units, right? The window unit technically is supposed to drain out the back to the exterior of your house, just like all HVAC units. They have a condensate line, the water evacuates to the outside exterior. But some of these folks, primarily renters, they don't care. The water is leaking inside the house down the wall. So you walk into the room and man, there's black mold everywhere.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So the system that is supposed to be filtrating the mold spores is actually almost feeding itself in a sense, right? And so those are the situations that I would be most concerned about, right? Another off the wall situation is I've been in another house where there's only mold in a closet, right? Well, what happens is they keep that closet door closed for months. Those folks may not go in that particular closet, so the air conditioning system isn't reaching it. That's what we call a dead space. Same thing can happen in a crawl space. You want air circulation to be moving those mold spores and to move the moisture. So I would say when people maybe are concerned about air quality, the first thing I would tackle is your HVAC system, right? And then if you're concerned about your crawl space, that would be like
what
a
about
secondary
humidity? I hear people talk about, like, now a lot of these smart thermostats are measuring your humidity levels inside of your home. Are there levels where like that is indicative of something problematic, maybe in the crawl space or elsewhere that you've run into?
It can be. Well, this is the thing, right? So again, we're talking humans, and there's not really a lot of regulation on moisture because humans are so different. You might have somebody that has a humidifier in their house. Their living area is too dry. It dries their lungs out. And then you've got someone next door, they've got a dehumidifier because they need it drier, right? And so when it comes to humans, some people move to Florida because it's more humid. It's apparently better for your joints, right? But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the person. Some people might have asthma, and so a certain level of mold spores might be worse for someone else, right? I had a gentleman, 96 years old, wild dog, man. I mean, this guy was alive, dude, for a 96-year-old. He had pet deers coming up to his house. He had a pack of peacocks that he had as pets. But man, I kid you not, I went under his house and I found moisture readings in the 40%. It was so wet under there. The insulation was just soaking wet. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, there's a small percentage of people who can live in this level of moisture. Because once because the HVAC system was not like really well put together either. This man, you could smell the dampness in his house. But here he is, 96-year-old,
Wasn't impacting
kicking.
him
You
too
know what I'm
much.
saying? But there could be exactly. But if someone else was to come into that house, man, they might get a
Sure.
headache within 5 seconds.
Yep.
Right?
So
In fact,
sorry, go
I
ahead.
had made a I had made a recommendation to him because he was about to put the house on the market, right? And I was like, man, I don't know, this is going to ding
Yeah, you're not
a
gonna be able to
moisture
sell the house
report.
with
Like,
40%
no one,
crawl space moisture.
yeah, no, no. And you know what he said? He goes, I don't care. He goes, I'm not doing nothing. he told me, he's like, I'm 96 years old. He goes, they can take it or leave it. I said, yes, sir. So again,
That's
you
why you're
see
not
how
a
much he
realtor.
cares about it.
So you're if someone is comes to you and they're like, hey, my humidity is consistently above 50% in my house, you're not inherently concerned about that.
No, I'm not. If it comes down to tacks and needles, the way that we can really get down to it is basically an air test or a culture test. And what that does, it gives you a spore count. And again,
Do you do those kind
this
of
is
tests?
still not completely well. We do, but we send it to a third party laboratory, right? And again, even that is not super concrete, right? Because it still depends on the person. The reason we do these tests is because we can at least get a spore count. And then there's a general consensus on if a spore count gets so high, it would be considered problematic for the general public, right? And so at that point, all the parties involved can be like, okay, well, this might be an issue. We might need to address it. Because, some people, man, they don't want to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? Where some people are like, man, I've got to get this done. But as far as the humidity in the house, I'm not going to get all crazy unless I see it building up everywhere, or if we do like a spore
that makes
count.
sense. So we're almost at an hour here. One question though that I wanna clear the air on for some people. One thing that drives me crazy is after a big rain, we've had flooding and whatnot. People go in there and want to do their CL100, right after that. How frequently do CL100s fail after we had a big storm in the area? Is that pretty common?
Yeah, I would say it's probably more common than not. And again, there's a spectrum. Just like with the air quality, there's a spectrum, what we call like people who sound the alarm. If I go into a crawl space and I see a little sitting water, I'm not going to freak out, right? Will it fail a CL100? Yes, it will. There is a location on the CL100 that appropriates sitting water because it can be an issue. Now, if you get a heavy rain and there's a way for that water to slowly work its way out, you're going to be probably fine, right? Am I going to say you're always going to be fine? No, because you never say never, right? So there are situations where if there's sitting water for a long period of time, over time, right? That moisture in the lumber is going to suck it up because it's porous. And that's why the moisture readings on the lumber are so important, because people are like, oh, those moisture readings are going to be really high in the wood because we just had a big rain last night. Well, that might not be true, right? You can have sitting water. I've had this many times. Sitting water in the crawl space, 15 to 16% in the lumber, right? 15 to 16% does not fail a CL100, does not proliferate fungus or mold. It's actually a very good number for lumber. But that's because that sitting water isn't always going to be a long-term issue, right? It just happened to come in,
and it's normal for crawl spaces honestly, to have sitting water after some rain.
It's very possible, right? I mean, man, I've done moisture work in crawl spaces that have 9% moisture readings just because the people were so concerned about water getting in. And I'm sitting here thinking like, this is amazing. Like 9% is insane. But they're
probably from Florida.
For peace of mind, they want it. Yeah. And so I would say, there are some companies, they will take a look at the water stains on the foundation to, I can't remember. It's like they use incandescent light
Okay.
or whatever. I feel like that can be a little misleading personally, because those moisture stains may not be necessarily due to something current. It might be a situation that happened years ago. Am I saying that it's not helpful to a potential buyer? A buyer might want to look into that. I don't know if it's going to give you great data. I'm a very big stickler on the moisture readings in the lumber, because I think that's the most telling. That's going to tell you if this has been a long time occurrence, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Well, Andrew, I think that's about all the time that we have today. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you were hoping to cover? Do you have anything else to say to the audience?
Oh man. Well, I love the podcast, man. I want to take a moment to brag on it a little bit. Well, in today's world, I feel like there's a lot of people that can talk about things, but I really appreciate the fact that you go by a lot of numbers. And I think that gives us a lot more, it helps us evaluate the market. You know what I'm saying? It's a little bit more telling. So I appreciate you doing that homework, because I know it takes a lot of work, man.
Thank you.
And it does help us from a pest control standpoint, because it gives us an idea of how many people are potentially moving in, who's building houses and things like that. So thanks for doing that, man. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate your hard work. Other than that, man, I can always talk about a ton of pest control
We'll have you on
stories,
for a
but
second show where you can just tell stories.
That's right. I'm really grateful for the customers at Dixon Pest, man. I just think about all the different people that we've been able to serve over the years, and this might be a little chance for me to tell them I appreciate them, because I'm sure some of our customers listen to your podcast as well. So,
well, that was Andrew Dixon from Dixon Pest. I'm always an advocate for local businesses, small businesses. If you need pest control, contact Andrew. Andrew, you want me to put your phone number or your email, or what? Just we'll talk afterwards. I'll figure out what contact information you want me to put in there. But that'll be in the show notes in case you need to reach out to Dixon Pest for any of your pest control needs. Highly recommend them. I've used Andrew, as I said earlier, for a very, very long time. He's always done a great job. Stands by his work. His employees are great as well. Which is not easy in this environment, as any employer knows. But what's that?
That's right. I said, that's right.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you guys for listening. My contact information is in the show notes. Andrew's will be as well. If you need to reach out to me for your real estate needs, him for your pest control needs, and please, if you like the show, physically like it by pressing the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, leave a little comment, all those good things. We will talk to you guys next time.